On today's show, we'll get the Cavs' full schedule on Thursday afternoon. But what we know about it so far, they might not be the biggest draw in the Eastern Conference. Plus, we're going to talk about what many are calling the most difficult group in NBA Cup history. Well, at least I'm calling it that. We'll discuss on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot, and you're listening to the latest edition of Locked On Cavs, where today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this Major League Baseball season. On today's show, we will talk about East Group B, the most difficult group in NBA Cup history. Many are saying, I don't know if many are saying that, but I'm saying that. I very much believe that to be true. And we'll talk about what we know so far about the Cavs schedule. So far, we have 6 games of the Cavs schedule of the 80 that will be released by Thursday afternoon. The full schedule will be put out at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So by the time you're listening to this, we might know more than when I'm recording this late on Wednesday night. But we know about 6 games that the Cavs have so far. Those 6 games are either nationally televised or part of their NBA Cup group. The 6 games we know that the Cavs opening the season in Philly on October 22nd, that'll be their first matchup against the Philadelphia 76ers with LeBron James. We assume that is a season opening matchup. I cannot imagine that the Cavs are going to be on the second night of a back-to-back in Philly on national TV. I don't think the NBA is going to do that to start the year. There's one note there that I do want to get to in a second, but we also know that the Cavs will not be playing on Christmas. We'll talk about that in a minute more. They will be playing on Martin Luther King Day, which that is one of the NBA's primetime days. It's not the spotlight day the way that Christmas Day is, but that is a big day on the NBA calendar, and they're taking on the Detroit Pistons. Game is in Cleveland, set for noon tip-off, which is a cool thing that I think the NBA does on MLK Day. So that is a good spot for the Cavs to be in. That'll be on NBC/Peacock. And then we know there are 4 NBA Cup group stage games. So on November 6th, they will take on the Philadelphia 76ers. That game in Cleveland, that will be broadcast nationally on Amazon Prime. November 13th, they will take on Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Miami Heat. That game not nationally televised. November 20th, they will be taking on the Indiana Pacers inside Rocket Arena. And then November 25th, they go back to Madison Square Garden, where they will take on the New York Knicks, the team they lost to in the Eastern Conference Finals last year for the 4th and final NBA Cup group stage game. Now, of those 6 games, obviously, 3 of them are nationally televised to some extent. Amazon Prime, ESPN has the opening game in Philadelphia on Thursday as part of the first, the week back or whatever, their opening week where they have a lot of nationally televised games. And I do think that the NBA actually seemed to put more of a priority on early season matchups than they did Christmas Day games. Like, I think that opening week matchups are better than the Christmas Day matchups. Not to say that there aren't good matchups on Christmas Day, because there certainly are. But I think the opening week slate is a little bit better, and I think that should have a lot of people excited for basketball early in the season. I think it's awesome that the Cavs are playing on MLK Day. I think that's a great spot for them. I think that's a great opponent for them. They deserve to be in that spotlight. But I also think the fact that they're not playing on opening night, where they could have been a team to take on the Knicks on opening night, that is something, again, I would not have predicted that. I did not think it would happen. But that's something that could have made sense from the NBA standpoint. You've got the Knicks versus the team that the Knicks beat in the conference finals at Madison Square Garden, because of course, that the game at MSG is going to be ring night, like the Knicks are always going to play on opening night, or I should say the team that wins the title is always going to play on opening night. Or even furthermore, the Boston Celtics are taking on the Detroit Pistons, a 3 o'clock local time start on opening night. The Cavs could have been in that spot, and they weren't. And then obviously they were not going to be the West Coast spot. But when you pair that with the fact that they're not playing on Christmas, which I don't think should be the end of the world, but it's fair to look at this and say the Cavs might not be the biggest draw in the Eastern Conference. And I don't think anybody expected them to be the biggest draw, but I will be very interested in seeing when this stuff gets tallied up later on Thursday, because it will. We will have information for all of these teams on Thursday when the full schedule comes out. How many nationally televised games the Cavs have compared to some of the other top dogs in the Eastern Conference. The Knicks are probably the Sixers are probably going to have more nationally televised games than anybody else, because one thing that I do think hasn't really been talked about with LeBron joining Philly is LeBron being back in the East. I think is a big deal for TV folks, because having to stay up late and watch the Lakers, and the Lakers are always going to be a big draw, right? They are the glamour franchise in the National Basketball Association. They've always been that, and they will always be that. Even when they're not great, they're going to have eyeballs on them. They are the Dallas Cowboys of the NBA, or the New York Yankees of the NBA. That's who the Los Angeles Lakers are. So they're always going to be a draw. But it's tough to stay up until 10:30 on a Tuesday night to watch the Lakers at times when you're on the East Coast, the way that, over 50% of the population of this country is. So LeBron being back in the Eastern time zone, not the Eastern Conference per se, but playing in the Eastern time zone, I think is a really, really big deal as it pertains to TV stuff. Like, I would bet that the Philadelphia 76ers are going to lead the league in nationally televised games. They're going to be the number one draw. And that doesn't mean they're going to be the best team. I think, obviously, they're going to be very good. They're a team that should be capable of winning the title, but they're going to be the biggest draw. They obviously are a much bigger draw than the Cavs as it pertains to national TV. The New York Knicks were also always going to be a bigger draw. They're in New York. They're the defending champions. They deserve to be a bigger draw. But after that, I don't know that there's like a great case for a third team in the Eastern Conference, and I'm not so sure that the Cavs are looked at as the third biggest draw in the Eastern Conference. Because you could say, okay, the Pistons won 60 games last year. No one is really interested in the Detroit Pistons nationally. They're just not a team that's got a lot of star power. Cade Cunningham is awesome, but they don't have a lot of other needle movers on that team. You could look at the Boston Celtics. They should be really good, and they are a glamour franchise just like the Lakers. They're going to have a lot of eyeballs on them. I will be very curious how many nationally televised games they get with, obviously, Jaylen Brown no longer there. And I do think it's really interesting that we do not know, as of 11 o'clock on Wednesday night, we do not know of a game between the Sixers and the Celtics, that they're not playing in any of those primetime slots. And that was really interesting to me. But the Miami Heat, they obviously have Giannis. They're playing on Christmas Day. I don't think the Heat are going to be all that good. I think that they're going to probably have a front-loaded, nationally televised schedule, and the back half of their season might not have as many national TV games because I don't know that they're going to be all that great later on in the season. But I think the fact that the Cavs not playing on opening night, they're going to, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about, presuming that they're not opening with a back-to-back, that they're not playing on Wednesday night before they play Philly on Thursday of opening week, they're going to be the second to last team to begin its season, with only the Denver Nuggets, who play in the late game on Thursday night against Oklahoma City. That's the only team, I imagine, that's going to get a later start to the season than the Cavs do. And that is an interesting thing. I don't know how well that bodes for the Cavs. That sort of situation can lead to maybe having more back-to-backs. Like the Denver Nuggets had a lot of back-to-backs last year. Now the Cavs had a lot of 5 and 7s. They had a rough draw from a rest standpoint on their schedule last year, but starting later, it's 1 day later than the rest of the league for the most part, but it's a big deal. Like that is something that does matter at least a little bit. So I thought that was an interesting thing that we think we've learned so far. Again, that could be a back-to-back, which I don't think would be great news either, but that would change this conversation just a little bit. Not playing on Christmas, I don't think is that big of a deal. Although, again, there are 4 Eastern Conference teams that are playing on Christmas. And the fact that there are 4 Eastern Conference teams playing on Christmas and one of them is not the Cavs, I do think could be looked at as a little bit disrespectful towards who the Cavs are. But I can also look at this and say, Cavs haven't had a good offseason. If you look at the teams playing on Christmas, Boston, Philly, Miami, New York, all of those teams, they've had better off seasons than the Cavs, right? The Cavs have not had a sexy offseason, obviously not getting LeBron. And as of this recording, they've not made a significant addition. They've not added Peyton Watson or Jonathan Kuminga. Like Mario Hezonja and Malik Thomas are the only two guys that they have brought in from outside the organization. So this has not been a sexy offseason. So like, I think that we do have to sort of understand why they're not that big of a draw, because they've not had the sexy summer that a lot of these teams have had, or they're not a marquee franchise. They're not a flagship franchise of the NBA the way the Knicks are, who, of course, are the defending champs, and that's always going to be the case, and it deserves to be the case, or the Celtics, who have not had a sexy summer either. But those things matter when it comes to scheduling. So the Cavs have kind of been overlooked, I think, early on. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I do think that is the truth. Now, I talked about their NBA Cup group being incredibly difficult, and it absolutely is. We'll talk about it next right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now on FanDuel, it's baseball season, and it has not maybe been my favorite baseball season. I think that's fair to say. Not everybody here that's listening or watching this knows, but I kind of live and die with the Guardians. Like, I watch the Guardians almost every single night. It has not been fun. And one of the things that can make baseball more fun is betting on home runs. That's one of the things that I love to do. That is one of my favorite bets in all of the sports. Like, I really, really look forward to during the basketball season. I look forward to, springtime getting here for a number of different reasons. You have NBA playoffs. Obviously, the weather is changing. You've got golf back in play. But I love betting on dingers. And right now, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. And even if you're watching a baseball team and I know they got to win on Wednesday night, and thankfully for that, but it hasn't been all that fun to watch, you can still have fun by betting on dingers. It's easy to play. All you got to do, make your free pick for who you think is going to hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you will receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the Major League Baseball season. Daily Dingers, it's a fun way to stay engaged with everyday's games, whether you're following your favorite team or maybe just keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep, and now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch arrives. So if you're ready to play your game today, join all the action at FanDuel. That's FanDuel, FanDuel.com, to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who is going to hit a home run. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you again for making this edition of Locked On Cavs your very first watch or listen of the day. If you are watching on YouTube, do me a favor, click subscribe, thumbs up, notification bell, all those things. And if you're listening wherever you get your podcast to what is kind of a bonus edition today, I'll have a full edition of Locked On Cavs on YouTube at some point Thursday evening, going over the full schedule, and then podcast feeds first thing Friday morning, going over the full schedule. But this is just going to be a 2-segment bonus show. Been a bit of a busy week in my life, like some personal stuff going on. So I wanted to talk about this stuff while I could, and we'll get to the full schedule a little bit later in the week once it comes out. And this is not news. We've known the NBA Cup groups for a while. That came out earlier this summer, I believe it was. And we knew that it was going to be the Cavs, the Sixers, the Heat, the Pacers, and the Knicks. And I believe that these are sort of formulated based on where teams finished last year. Like, I don't know that it's a true snake draft. I don't think it is. But it's sort of like, okay, you have a top 3 seed. Like, the 3 top seeds are all split into different groups from the year before. So you've got the Pistons in one group, the Boston Celtics in another group, and the New York Knicks in the Cavs group. And then it's kind of divided evenly after that. But for the Cavs to be in a group with the defending champion New York Knicks, who are going to be very good, the Philadelphia 76ers, who, yes, they finished 7th in the East last year, but they've added LeBron, they've added Jaylen Brown. Like, the Sixers are going to be a ton to deal with. You've got the Miami Heat, who finished, I believe it was 10th in the conference last year. They were not very good, but guess what? They added Giannis Antetokounmpo. And then the Indiana Pacers finished with the second worst record in the Eastern Conference, ahead of only the Washington Wizards, but they didn't have Tyrese Halliburton all year. So they were like a fake bad team. I'm not saying that they were a good team last year. They were most certainly not that, but they were not trying to be a good team, right? They were a team that was very clearly in a gap year, and everybody knew what was happening. This is an absurd group. Now, I've not gone back and studied all the groups in NBA Cup history, the illustrious NBA Cup. I've not gone back and done that, but it is really challenging for me to look at this group and say, there are 5 teams here that expect to have top 6 seeds in the Eastern Conference. Now, that's not going to happen. I would bet that not all 5 of these teams, again, Cavs, Sixers, Heat, Pacers, and Knicks, I would bet not all 5 of them finish with top 6 seeds. But going into the season, the expectation of the Cavs is, and I think that this is being conservative, but the expectation of the Cavs is to be a top 6 seed. The expectation of Miami, after adding Giannis, is going to be a top 6 seed. The expectation of the Pacers, who were a Tyrese Halliburton injury, 14 months ago, away from winning the title, they're going to expect to be a top 6 seed. The New York Knicks just won the title. They're going to expect to be a top 6 seed. All of these teams expect to be playoff teams. That's absurd. I don't know that you've ever been able to say that about any group in NBA Cup history. And I really do think that this one is going to be a really, really interesting test for the Cavs early on. The fact that they play all of these good teams in the Eastern Conference, or teams that we think are going to be good in the Eastern Conference, before Thanksgiving, we are going to learn a lot about this Cavs team early on. We are going to learn a ton. Because it's not just that they play all these teams before Thanksgiving. They play Philly twice before Thanksgiving. Obviously, opening week, they play them again on the 6th. They might play these teams more than once before Thanksgiving. Like you think back to the way the NBA Cup has been situated in the past. I believe last year, the Sixers were in the NBA Cup group with the Cavs, if I'm not mistaken. And they played in Philly twice. They played in Miami twice last year. They have kind of had these baseball series. So, like, this could be a situation where they play in Miami on November 13th. They could be playing in Miami on November 11th as well. That's a situation we could see happen. They could play in New York on November 25th, and they could play in New York on November 23rd. Like, we are going to learn a ton about this Cavs team before Thanksgiving even arrives. And I don't know how many games that's going to be. It's probably going to be like somewhere around 15 to 18 games, somewhere in that neighborhood. But that's going to be a really important thing for the Cavs, especially as I kind of alluded to, as you look at the strength of the Eastern Conference. Because right now, I think you can look at this and say 11 teams in the East think that they can finish with top 6 seeds. Obviously, you have the Cavs, you have the Knicks, you have the Sixers, you have the Heat, and you have the Pacers in the Cavs group. And then you go to the other groups. Detroit thinks they're a playoff team. They won 60 games last year. I don't know that they got considerably worse, but they got kind of worse. The Boston Celtics, they're going to expect to be a playoff team. I think they're a little bit worse. The Toronto Raptors, and we don't know what's going on with Kawhi, but they're a team that is going to expect to be a playoff team again. The Atlanta Hawks got better. They're going to expect to be a playoff team. Orlando is going to expect to be a playoff team. Indiana, Washington, who obviously they had a number 1 pick. They're going to have Trae Young. They will have Anthony Davis, presumably. Like, the Eastern Conference is going to be a gauntlet. And the Cavs are going to be tested early, and the Cavs are going to be tested often. And I think that this NBA Cup group that they're playing in, while definitely stronger than Group A and Group C, Group B, I think, is the group of death. That is just kind of a microcosm of what I think life in the Eastern Conference is going to be this year. I'm not saying the Cavs have to go out there and, make some statement and win their group. I don't think that should be the thing that matters to them. But they need to find ways to stack wins early, because I don't think that with how strong the East is right now, I don't think the Cavs can afford to get off to the start they had last year, where they were around 500 at Christmas and then they turned it on. It's not going to be a sprint, but it's not quite going to be a marathon either. It's going to be like running a 2-mile race. That's kind of what I think the season's going to be. You're going to have to keep your foot on the gas a little bit more than for a full marathon if you're a team. And that's not just the Cavs. I think that's every team in the Eastern Conference. But like I said earlier, the NBA full schedule going to come out Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. I will have an episode of Locked on Cavs reacting to that schedule up Thursday evening, and then I will have it in your podcast feeds very first thing Friday morning. So I need you to make sure that wherever you're listening to the show, could be Apple, Spotify, YouTube, click a subscribe button for me, hit that notification bell, hit that thumbs up button on YouTube, and I will be back a little bit later talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.